Welcome to the DEC4 podcast. You can access episodes, companion articles, research notes and links, as well as information about our contributors and supporters at DEC4podcast.com. Hope you enjoy the program. Gary, a very warm welcome. Great to see you.
Thank you, sir. It's good to see you.
For this episode, we're relying on some of the research and the work that you've done, and we're going to try and get a bit more of a handle on Colonel Parker and his business relationship with Elvis, and we've talked about that previously in some detail, particularly in the wake of the contract renegotiations with RCA in 1973, which were, I think, quite pivotal to what we're going to be talking about today. And looking at some other writing and research that you've done, we are going to get a little bit of additional context by learning about Tommy James and the Shondells and his relationship with Roulette Records, which is fascinating and eye-opening. But we're going to have a look at Colonel Parker from, I think, a unique perspective. Can you introduce us to Blanchard Tual?
Yes, I would be happy to. It was wonderful to stumble on the story of this man, and I have to give credit to author Alana Nash. I've always enjoyed her books on Elvis, and she introduced me to this personage, and one of her books went into detail about the goings-on in the wake of the death of Elvis Presley. It's quite a remarkable story, actually. After the death of Elvis Presley, his father, Vernon, was the executor of the estate. We all know that his mother was a major influence on him, but his father was as well, and maybe in a bit of a different way. Poor Vernon lived in fear of poverty, which is interesting to note. From the outside, Elvis Presley looked to be very wealthy and have it all together and to have whatever he wanted. But Vernon was afraid probably every day that his son would squander their last dollar. They wouldn't be able to recoup or make any money to replace all of the money that Elvis was spending on ranches and homes and jewelry, etc. So there's a lot of reliance. Vernon had a lot of reliance on Colonel Parker, and rightfully so. I mean, it's hard to argue that Elvis Presley made a lot of money in Hollywood and through records. We can debate, of course, how much more he could have or how much more he could have kept himself. But my point is that he made a lot of money, and Vernon obviously could see that was working, and the colonel knew how to make a dollar and how to get the most, maybe not the most, but a lot out of the talent of Elvis Presley. So in the wake of his death, Vernon, as the executor, kept him in charge of merchandising rights and Elvis's name and his image. And it was interesting to learn that these agreements, in almost every instance, entitled Parker to more than 50% of the money to be made from Elvis merchandise and records, etc. Before Vernon died, he passed in 1979, Priscilla Presley had pressured him, I guess you could say, to make her the executor of the estate. Now, yet again, we can go on a tangent about Priscilla and investigate her motivations, but I think it's a pretty cold, hard, cynical person that could totally discount the idea that perhaps Priscilla was thinking of Lisa Marie when she thought Lisa Marie is still a child. And if Vernon dies, well, when he dies, she needs to be looked after. Surely something can come from the career and life of Elvis Presley and all the money that he made and that could be made going forward. Surely that thing could be a child being looked after throughout her growing up, and whether it be post-secondary education or just her life in general. And of course, Priscilla wanted to be the one to look after things. Oddly, upon the death of Vernon, Priscilla also maintained agreements with Colonel Parker. And the only reason I can think of for this folly was that perhaps Scylla and others, maybe most other people, were unaware of the extent to which Parker had benefited, from one of the most lucrative singing careers ever known at that time. And Elvis World, was an isolated place, and, it was hard to compare to other performers or to other other anything, because Elvis World was this cloistered, closed off area. So Colonel Parker is in the position he's in. He is driving this bus to a certain extent, and because of him, we make money. This is working. Let's carry on. Of course, if they had had a second, a third, if they had anybody else's opinion, they would have known, wait a minute now, you're getting robbed. So to lock down things for Lisa Marie, Scylla petitioned the probate court to perpetuate and to rubber stamp this agreement with Colonel Parker and to carry on as usual. But thankfully, there was a judge out there, an unnamed judge, who was astonished to find that Parker routinely took more than half of Presley's earnings during the singer's lifetime, and he was probably stunned that the estate was happy to just carry on with this. And he thought there is certainly enough grounds to investigate here because of the wanting to look after the best interest of a minor, of course, Lisa Marie. And this is when the judge appointed 38-year-old Memphis attorney Blanchard Tual as Lisa's guardian ad litem, they call it. It's a Latin term that means looking after somebody who can't look after themselves. So Blanchard got the case, and he took 4 months to go over all of the web and the goings on and the contractual things and the business dealings. Blanchard Tual filed a 300-page report that bluntly stated that the estate should not continue with an agreement signed between two parties when one of the parties was dead. That was the starting point, was, well, let's just hold on now because the agreements are between Elvis Presley and Colonel Tom Parker. Well, Elvis Presley is dead. And so those agreements should terminate upon his death. Blanchard went forward and recommended to the court that they not approve the 50% commission being paid to Parker because it was, now I use a lot of quotes in my article because it's quite remarkable the strong language that Blanchard and the Memphis courts used.
Yes, I noticed that. Yeah, incredible.
Yeah, Parker, do not continue in this arrangement with Colonel Parker because, quote, the dealings together were excessive, imprudent, unfair to the estate, and beyond all reasonable bounds of industry standards. And I thought it was amazing when I read that Blanchard Tual actually had to specify that all monies due to the estate for various things, they must actually be paid to the estate instead of Colonel. So he must have thought any money that is being made by this man, even in death, is not going to him or his executors or his descendants. It's going directly to Colonel Parker. And he is doling it out as he sees fit. So he wanted that to be stopped immediately, and he went on to say that Parker had been guilty of, quote, self-dealing and overreaching, and having, quote, violated his duty to Elvis and the estate. We can pause there for a moment because this is fascinating. You could call him technically a third party, a dispassionate lawyer who is doing his job. Now, sidebar quick, I've called Blanchard Tual a hero, and I believe him to be. And there was a couple of readers who chimed in, scoffing a little bit at that, but it was sort of tongue-in-cheek, the point being that he rectified a lot of things that Elvis people think were wrong in Elvis World. And bottom line, he was just doing his job. He was given this job to do, and he did it because that's what he did for a living. But it's just interesting to note that when the Elvis business was handed over to a lawyer, maybe for the first time ever in history, the dealings in Elvis World were given to somebody that wasn't Colonel Parker's guy, that wasn't, vetted by him or controlled by him. This was finally there was somebody else looking at the books, and this is what they come up with. Colonel Parker has violated his duty to Elvis.
In your article, you also quote the judge who said that his understanding of the arrangement, quote, shocks the conscience of the court.
Yes, it's remarkable. And again, we have to think, like, at this point in time, 2026, we know so many things about Elvis World, but, there was so much that was not known at the time. Like even the, quote, bodyguard book, Elvis, What Happened, we think of it today as, oh yeah, well, whatever. But at the time, it was this major revelation behind the curtain because, like I said, Elvis World was a very closed, nobody knew nothing about nothing in there. So as time rolls on, these things sneak out. And so again, the judge and the Blanchard Tual, the attorney, they are shocked when they finally understand what's happening here. Yeah, it shocks the conscience of the court. I mean, that is just about as strongly as you can say it.
I think it's a key point, the one that you make about the insularity of what you refer to as Elvis world, which was this bubble. And
yeah,
it's fascinating to think that, yeah, I guess this was really the first time that there had been any kind of external audit or scrutiny. You know, they didn't really embark on any kind of tax minimization, so probably the IRS had probably not even looked into it.
Yeah, you make a good point about the IRS. We've read before in various books, Colonel would always play ball and would always play nice with the feds just because I don't want nobody poking their nose in. I was thinking about the never want him to tour anywhere where I can't be right there. I never want him to sit down with anybody else. I never want nobody to get in his ear. I don't want nobody, even when poor Larry Geller comes along and starts talking spiritual to, he doesn't want nobody to get into Elvis's head. And, you know, these business dealings, all of his chicanery, well, that was definitely sacrosanct, and for sure he didn't want nobody poking his nose into that. But I love that my man Blanchard Tual was not done. He even criticized the executors for giving Parker full reign. He even, as if to say, like, what are you guys thinking? I mean, not only Elvis is dead, fine, but wouldn't you want to fix things now? And again, what about this minor that I'm supposed to be looking out for? So he went after them as well. He claimed that documents supposedly detailing where money went were unsatisfactory. And he started the ball rolling and strongly suggested that Parker be fully investigated to discover his net worth, his past income tax returns, and all that stuff that we just talked about that Parker guarded very closely. Now I'm thinking, you know what, something stinks here, Blanchard Tual, and we need to dig in here. And I love that he went even for RCA, the big, clean record company. Parker, of course, is shady, but a record company, it's a multi-million-dollar business. They do everything right, don't they? Well, no. Blanchard says, you know what? We need to dig into RCA as well, too. And I want to see details of all the money that they had paid out, specifying where it went. And Tual asked for the same type of audits to be provided from everyone Parker did business with. So he knew that something was afoot, and he knew that if I look at everybody, movie studios, concert promoters, merchandisers, I'm going to find that most of the money got funneled right to Colonel Parker.
It's interesting too when we were talking about strong language. In terms of RCA, he's using the words collusion, conspiracy, and fraud.
Yeah, I mean, there's no gray area there. There's no, well, what do you mean by that? This major corporation that's been around for how many years at that point, they are in cahoots. They're complicit. They're colluding with Parker, and this is so accurate because they must have known. They must have left meetings with Parker rolling their eyes and saying, does nobody know that this guy is making all the money from Elvis Presley? Like, what is going on there? And yet they just carried on until they ran up against Blanchard Tual. Blanchard was a bit even put off when the estate did not immediately sort of capitulate and even express some sort of gratitude for his findings. Were part like, I'm revealing all this to you. There's been robbery going on. Tual could only come to the conclusion that the estate's executors and the attorneys were flat out afraid of Colonel Parker, which is another quote. He said they must be afraid of this man for whatever reason, I don't know. He was, quote, stunned at the hold Parker seemed to have over the very people he had defrauded out of a fortune, $7 or $8 million in the last 3 years alone. In Blanchard Tual's opinion, Parker was trying his best to bleed Elvis in the 1970s before he inevitably passed away. So all of us people that look so askance at Colonel Parker, again, this is not a biographer, this is not a writer, this is an attorney, a lawyer doing a job, and this is business, and he is saying Colonel tried to make as much money from Elvis as he could before Elvis inevitably died. So if that doesn't confirm everything that we've ever thought about Colonel, I don't know what more you would need.
As you say, he's not a biographer. He doesn't have to sell books or magazine articles or anything like that. These are the facts as he
He has taken an oath to do a
Exactly.
job, and he's fulfilling that
Yeah.
job, and these are his
Yeah.
findings.
And when you're talking words like conspiracy and fraud, I mean, you're not just talking about a manager maybe just skimming a little off the top. I mean, you are alleging criminal behaviour.
Criminal behavior, yes, you say collusion, conspiracy, fraud, misrepresentation, bad
Yeah.
faith, and overreaching. Blanchard claimed that RCA, quote, paid off the colonel to keep Elvis in
Yeah.
line and recording the way they wanted him to. We can talk about the 70s albums and the way that Elvis Presley recorded music. Sometimes it hurts me, even though the finished product is so wonderful. I love it. But the way he was, we need a Christmas album, we need 4 singles, we need an album. Like RCA and Parker steered him into the studio and basically controlled things, and they were colluding together. Even Blanchard Tual said that they were cheating the, quote, most popular American folk hero of this century.
And in fact, just on that, we spoke at some length on our Aloha from Hawaii specials about the contract or the back catalogue buyout of 1973 and the contract renegotiations. And I've just embedded a little clip on this episode's webpage where we just, thanks to Peter Goralnick's work, we have quoted from his book, Careless Love, The Unmaking of Elvis Presley, just where the money went.
A sad realization that in your cynical moments and you think, I wonder if this was happening, now it's almost kind of confirmed for us. And it's uncomfortable in a way for us Elvis people. And what is equally uncomfortable for me to have learned, especially for many of us Elvis scholars, Blanchard Tual also added to his report, quote, Elvis was naive, shy, and unassertive. Parker was aggressive, shrewd, and tough. His strong personality dominated Elvis, his father, and all others in Elvis's entourage. Difficult to accept, but maybe not inaccurate, because we all know about how Elvis was kept in line. We all know about there was that big meeting when Elvis wanted out, or when Larry Geller came on board and Parker took him into the room, and when he came back out, Elvis was cowed. I mean, it's hard to think. This is why, when Elvis sings My Way, I get sad, because it wasn't that way at all. And to have that driven home to us too, if we're going to take as gospel everything that Blanchard has said and say that it confirms a lot of things for us, yes, Parker's a thief. Well, what about this part too? It may confirm that niggling thing in the back of our mind that why didn't Elvis stand up and say, I don't care what happens, I need to back up and extricate myself from this person. And that's another topic for another day. We could fill reams of tape. But the fact that this dispassionate third-party Memphis lawyer in his report mentions, well, you know what, guys, maybe you don't want to say it or you don't want to accept it, but the truth is, it looks to me like Elvis was cowed by Parker, and that's what happened, and that was embedded early, in the 50s even, the way he sort of insinuated himself into the Presley family. And that confirms things too, where Elvis was thinking, well, we are making money. My daddy is scared to death, so I'll just keep going. So in a way, and I hate to say it, Elvis was kind of complicit too, because he sat back a lot, and these are the weeds, people. This is a tough things, but it's a reality that nothing is diminished by accepting this reality, but you have to embrace the truth, and that's kind of tough for us to hear, but I believe that is accurate.
I mean, you alluded to this a little earlier that Blanchard Tual was, quite, I guess, taken aback by the reaction, or perhaps the lack of reaction by the executors. So, what, if anything, was the end result of his, incredible work?
Well, he delivered his reports to the court in the summer of '81. And I mean, the boom was lowered. That's the only way you can say it. There was a judge, Judge Evans, who we should also give thanks to as well. He flat out ordered the estate to cease all payments to Parker. And it wasn't like you should enter into legal proceedings. He required the estate to file suit against Parker for fraud. And he ordered an investigation into RCA's dealings. So here's a judge saying, you will file suit against Parker because that is what is required here from what these findings are. You must file suit. RCA must be investigated. And the judge even went so far as to order the estate not to enter into any business with Parker any longer without the court's approval, which likely would never have come. Quote, the compensation received by Colonel Parker is excessive and shocks the conscience of the court, like you said earlier. So there's stipulations here. According to what we found here, this is outrageous. You must file suit and RCA must be investigated. So the estate didn't want to enter into a prolonged and costly legal battle with Parker. I mean, who knows what that would have looked like. And this is the same thing, too, the famous moment when Elvis said, Colonel, I'm done with you. And then the Colonel rung up his bill and said, well, you pay me this and I'm gone. And it was, Elvis had to carry on. And it's funny that his estate is almost doing the same thing. But it almost speaks to the canniness of Colonel Parker. He is interwoven into the life and career of Elvis Presley so deeply that just firing him is not a thing that can even happen. There's too much else going on. The executors and Parker, this was in 82, when the estate was on the brink of bankruptcy, if you can fathom that. They wanted to extricate themselves, and they reached an out-of-court settlement. Parker was paid $2.25 million to relinquish all claims to the Presley name and image and for his massive store of Elvis merchandise. Isn't it funny that Elvis was the singer, Colonel made merchandise about it, and, underwear and hats and lipstick and pictures and postcards, whatever. And he owned all that stuff and sold it back to the estate? This poster exists because of Elvis Presley. Some other man owns it and sells it back to his daughter, basically. Ridiculous. So, I wonder too, did Colonel, we always hope that, these villains, quote unquote, learn a lesson and they feel bad about something. And so I wonder if Colonel felt any remorse. Well, among this collection he had was a beloved toy of Lisa Marie's from her childhood. So he was kind enough to mail that to Priscilla with a note hinting at all the other items in his possession. Might have even been personal possessions of Elvis's child. So he dropped a word to the papers, too, that he was planning on opening his own museum with all these things that he owns, a museum in his home. This threat, of course, enabled him to ask for top dollar for his archives, which the estate did buy, and that's makes up a lot of what you see at Graceland today. So I would say he did not feel bad. He probably would defend himself. I'm a businessman. This was my job. Blanchard Tual's got a job. I got a job too. I'm managing the singer. He is my only client. I guess, that's a thing. You have to remember too what Elvis means to us today and what he meant in the 50s and in the 60s and in the 70s. It was saturation. He was everywhere. He's one of the biggest stars of all time. And he had one manager who put his name out there. Credit, I hate to use the word credit and Colonel Parker in the same sentence, but it is what it is. I mean, those 70s recordings that I'm so bugged about the way they were made, the records came out, I love them. They're great. The music is fantastic. So the way things happened is one thing, but the result is another. There still was an Elvis Presley all through those times in 77, even beyond after his death. So Colonel, played a major role in that. But in the end, was he a villain or wasn't he? I just got to say his only motivation was dollars and not so much dollars for his client. It was for dollars for him, comfort for him. The way he negotiated with the Las Vegas casinos enabled him to live the way he wanted to live for free. Give me the suite, give me the gambling tables, whatever. And in the end, he had to be bought out. And to think that he actually sold back things that belonged to the Presleys. So all this began, it began when a judge raised an eyebrow. He appointed Blanchard Tual. My man Blanchard went to work and he found things that disgusted him and he set the ball in motion. And eventually, Colonel Parker was extricated from the estate. Thank goodness.
Towards the end, we might just come back to some final thoughts on Colonel Parker. But in 2024, you were in Memphis. You wrote a great article about that, which we have linked to on the webpage and recommend, Walking in Memphis 2024. And can you tell us about your meeting with Blanchard Tual?
Well, I would be happy to. Yeah, I got an idea. We had been to Memphis 4 times, I think. And sometimes I'm pretty slow, but it occurred to me, well, Blanchard Tual is still alive and practicing law in Memphis. And of course, I got on the internet and checked it all out. And the main thing was, does he have an office? Does he work for I had to find out all these things. And where is it? Hopefully it's close to Graceland and where I'm staying. So therefore, maybe it's not out of the realm of possibility to go there. So I looked it up, and sure enough, George, it's not very far. I think that it's a shorter drive from Graceland to Tual Graves, PLLC is the name of the company, than it is to Beale Street or, say, Sun Records. My wife gave me a good idea, though. Maybe don't go in there cold. Drop him an email. So I was able to drop him an email ahead of time, just because you never know, especially in Elvis world, people are crazy.
Yes.
You never know. How much Elvis he gets pounded down his throat. I was thinking, he's a lawyer. He's a man of business. And Elvis was just this one, not small part, but this one part of his thing. So I thought, I'll try to be sane, and I'll just say, you know what? I'm just dropping you a line to say thank you for the good work that you did, with the estate and helping Lisa. And, thank you personally, because I got a good article out of that, and people read it and they like it. And I thought, I'll go ahead and send him the link to the article. I hope that would serve as an introduction of sorts. At least it would alert him to my existence. And then I got to imagining how it would go when I got there. What would it be like, the office, and is there security? What would be the situation? And I would sometimes think about it, George, and I would actually get a bit frightened, thinking, like, how would it go? Like, how would it go? Would I be calm enough? Would I be, would I look loony? What would be the case? So I went there. We were, my wife and I were traveling with friends of ours from Denmark, and they were all kind of caught up in the excitement. I mean, even though they were just sitting in the car, it was like, wow, how is this going to go? I didn't want to go in there, all four of us. I didn't even want to go, my wife and I, and her with a camera or ready to take a picture. I didn't want it to be like that. So I just went in there. I took one of my business cards. I gave it to the receptionist. And it's funny, maybe she's trained well. She made no move to take the business card at all. I'm hanging it over the counter, kind of, and she's just looking at me. I made a point that I have come from Canada to see Mr. Tual. I wrote an article about him, and I just wondered if he was available. So she finally slowly stood up, and she took the card, and she was gone. And while I'm pacing, and I'm starting to sweat now. And it was only about 90 seconds later, George, and doesn't he walk out, Blanchard Tual? And he's quite tall, but what followed was one of those dreamlike moments that you wish you could remember better. Like you wish it was sharper in your mind, and you wish you could remember every word and every kind of gesture. But I shook his hand, and he said that he had some people coming in at 10 a.m. And I looked at the clock quickly, and that was in 16 minutes. So he said, I wish I had time to sit and talk with you, but I gotta prep for this meeting. And I just simply said, I want to express my appreciation. I wrote this article, and, thank you for what you did for Lisa. And, Elvis fans, they take it pretty serious. And so this is not a small thing, what you've done. And we think of you as heroic. And he did say, well, he sometimes still does get, quote, fan mail from Japan and parts of Europe, and from people that know his role in the Elvis story. And I said, well, I know you probably would say you're just doing your job, but we think of it as heroic. And he chuckled a bit and said, yeah, it was a long time ago. I was just a young lawyer then. And I said, I'm glad to see that, your business is booming and you're so vital, because he was in his 80s. Well, he is in his 80s. I noticed, too, the people that worked in the office. His partners are all women. The receptionists were women. They're looking at me. They're looking at us. And you can see that bit of a grin, that bit of a smirk. And I wonder if they're thinking, oh, I wonder if it's another Elvis person, or it's cool that the guy that works here is this legend, this hero, So I think they were getting a kick out of it. I thought that was kind of comical. He said to me, now, he's being nice, and I didn't, take it to be 100% gospel, but I was pleased that he said my article was one of the best he had ever read. And he said, I wish I could blow it up and frame it. So I know that he's being nice and pleasant, but it was nice to hear, though. And he said, if you could come back, sometime, whatever, I'd love to sit and talk with you. But, the time was ticking now, and he hurried back, and I was overwhelmed, and it took maybe 5 minutes. And that was about it. But, it took me a while to recover. And as the morning wore on and we were doing our things and shopping and hitting the thrift stores in Memphis, which is another story, let me tell you, I almost got a bit regretful. Oh, I wish that I could have got a picture, or I wish that you guys could have, but all four of us even, were quite taken by the episode, and we started talking about it came to some realizations, and they even made some good points. Like, first of all, I walk in off the street, I'm wearing a t-shirt. It was my Stax Records t-shirt. And I enter this posh building, and I'm in shorts. I'm obviously on holidays. Now, Blanchard Tual, at 80-odd years old, could easily have been at home, hasn't got to the office yet. Or he could have been working from home, or golfing, or he could have been anything. When he said he had people coming in at 10, I jokingly thought to myself, well, you've got 16 minutes to sit and talk with me, just sit here. But then I thought, well, of course he needs time to prep for this meeting. And during that important prep time, George, he took a minute to come out and talk to me. He came out. The woman took in his card. Maybe she said, I don't know, man, there's some nut. But he got up and came out. And I also wondered, what the secretary said to him. But the realization that really hit me was, what if I had arrived 15 minutes later? Do you think he would have left that meeting to see some crazy blogger from Canada? I do not. I could easily have missed him for a number of reasons. But he expressed his desire to talk to me. I shook his hand twice. I met him. And there's been a couple times since then where I just thought I'm going to keep my name in his ear, and I've emailed him just to say, I think it was on the anniversary of Lisa's death or on some anniversary, thinking about you today, sir. Thanks again for meeting with me. It was real pleasure. And he replied right away. I even noticed that the reply said sent from my iPhone. So he's not at his desk at his computer. Maybe he's sitting home on his phone. He gets this email and he replies quickly to me saying, no problem. Next time you're in town, maybe we can get a chance to talk. What a pleasant, delightful man. So not only heroic, but a real decent fella. I just wish him all the best. It was quite a moment for me, George.
Well, yeah, look, it's wonderful to have that personal connection.
Absolutely.
And I guess just to spend a few minutes in his presence, and you would gauge what a fine gentleman he is. And
classy
and
guy.
in terms of what he says about your article, he doesn't strike me as the type of guy who's going to say something he doesn't mean.
No, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
So,
yeah.
I think we can see that from his work. And am I right in saying that the article that you did write, which we have embedded, by the way, in this episode's webpage, but it's very easily found on your website, soulrideblog.com, that's your most read article, is that right?
Actually, The Truth About Priscilla has become the most read.
Right.
It is ate up voraciously, George, every day. But Blanchard is in the top 2 or 3. And he had a run a couple years ago where he was the champ of the year, I think. But it is definitely one of my most read articles.
That's a wonderful experience to meet him, and thank you for sharing that with us.
My pleasure.
And as I said, look, we'll come back to Colonel Parker just for some final remarks at the end. But we did want to get a little bit of context in terms of the wider music business. And of course, we know Elvis and his part of the business was really in a bubble. But there's once again, Gary, we're indebted to you for your writing and your research. But can you tell us a little bit briefly about Tommy James? And then we might just have a bit of a chat about his relationship with this interesting gentleman named Morris Levy and Roulette Records.
Well, I'm happy to talk about my man, Tommy James. He and I go way back. I mean, when I was a teenager, I fell in love with his music, and this wasn't the 60s. This was like the early 90s. And for the longest time, I mean, a pre-internet era, you only knew so much about these artists and their lives and whatnot. Eventually, though, getting his autobiography was huge because, some biographical works are really heavy and really deeply penetrating and really long and really, hard to get your hands around. But Tommy's, he wrote it by himself. Well, he had a co-writer, but it's his autobiography, his memoir. And so it's very conversational, and he chats about his career and life. And it was a capper for me after having loved him for so long, learning a little bit about him. Was great. But yeah, Morris Levy, he was an entrepreneur, a nightclub owner, a record executive. And, it's funny, we talk about Colonel Parker, like, can we debate maybe, do you think that he was a gangster? Morris Levy was a gangster, full stop. Like, it's hard to believe that the guy existed. Like, he was involved with an organized crime family. It just so happens that he ran a record label. And the character of Hesh in the TV show Sopranos is sort of based on him, the Jewish mogul who runs a record company. And this book brought to light to me that not in every case, I guess, but it can be such a racket, the record business. And right from the get-go, Tommy talks about Morris Levy's name showing up as a songwriter of songs that, there's no way Morris Levy never wrote a word of these songs. But this goes back to the 40s and the big band era, where a singer would say, yes, I'll sing that song for you, but I need some of the action on the royalties. So Morris, of course, became a, quote, songwriter. And it's so interesting. Right from the beginning with Tommy's first song, Hanky Panky, they'd be shopping that around to different labels after they had been to Roulette. But everybody turned them down. And Tommy found out later that Morris had called all these labels and informed them, look, you got a kid coming to see you and he wants you to buy his record. You will not buy the record. The record is mine. So you just back off. Tell him no and step away. And everybody, of course, fell into line because this guy has a crime family behind him. It's very serious business. So that was just the beginning. The publishing, the songwriting royalties, and TJ reports that, Morris really ran Roulette like it was a crime family with music. He would do favors for artists, Morris would, but then you would be in his debt. Now, Tommy says that Levy simply did not pay royalties to his artists. Tommy said, I had to go on the road nonstop because concert tours, that money was mine. But from all these recordings, think about the wonderful recordings, not just Tommy, but a lot of other artists, they're not getting paid for the proliferation of their music.
Not a matter of getting an unfair percentage, is it? It's a matter of getting nothing.
Tommy would say at multiple times through the book, he didn't pay me. I didn't get any money from him. He says that Levy would not deal with major distributors who would expect integrity in accounting matters. So he would, again, maybe like Colonel, he had his own guys that he worked with and he kept it on the down low because we got to keep the dollars coming in. Tommy says at one point the IRS were given their own office at Roulette's headquarters because of how regularly they would pore over Levy's books, looking for ways to hang crimes on him. He was clever enough that they weren't able to, but it was chummy enough that they had offices in Roulette's building. So it can't be overstated how interesting this is, the relationship between James and Levy. Tommy says that he loved Morris, even though he robbed him. Tommy even eventually got a lawyer to negotiate a new deal with Levy, one that involved actual payments. And then James re-signed with Roulette. After a while, though, Levy simply abandoned that agreement and things reverted to the way they are, as if to say, what are you going to do about it? There's a psychologist could get involved here. James goes so far as to say that leaving Roulette would have made him feel like an orphan. He was in for the long haul. Even though they renegotiated and Levy reneged, Tommy just kept on going. There was a time when Levy eventually had to leave the country due to violent disputes with rival gang families. And James was also advised that he should go into hiding, as Levy's enemies may attempt to harm his cash cow. I'm not sure how many singers have had to take it on the lam to avoid getting kidnapped or killed.
Yeah, my goodness.
So finally, Tommy sadly had to come to the conclusion that he had to simply stop making music. He had to no longer provide product to Roulette because he was not making a living. We think about these singers as prolific and everything is written off and they love it. Well, some of them, like Tommy, were not living that high on the hog and needed to actually get paid. The Genovese crime family Levy was connected with. So Tommy stops making music. He said, the only way I could beat Morris was to sabotage my own career. Now, we could debate. Times were changing. This was the late 60s, early 70s by then. Music was changing. And the cynics could argue that maybe Tommy had run his course already. But the sad part is there's no going on. There's no finding another label. There's no anything, it seems. It's just I have to stop. And Tommy says you couldn't sue Morris. Like, Morris didn't care about lawsuits. He was a law unto himself. You weren't just fighting Morris. You were fighting the whole Genovese family. And they had no problem shooting their own people. What would they care about a long-haired rocker and his accountant? So Tommy actually, lived in fear. And he estimates that the money he could have made is about $40 million. And, the reader of this book could be blamed for disbelief that Tommy really did bond with this guy. But Tommy talks about being in his home and chatting and having this really kind of odd relationship. And when it was over, he even says that he missed it a bit. You know, despite receiving no accurate compensation, that is until Rhino bought Roulette in the 80s and started to issue Shondel's music on CD. You know, he missed that. It was exciting, I guess. And so it's a pretty fascinating story. You know, Levy always had a fatherly interest in Tommy. And, you know, I learned about the record that he made in Nashville. And I thought that seems odd that Tommy in the early 70s would go to Nashville. Why would he go there? Well, he was partly in hiding. His boss was in this bloody gang war. Like, this is insane almost. Like, because of a gang war, I have to go hide out in Nashville. And I might as well make a record while I'm here. It's a fascinating story, and it's a true story. The fact that he just simply did not pay his artists, the fact that he made money, and no doubt he was funneling some of it to the family. It probably didn't just stop at Morris. You know, he probably had tributes to pay. That was part of his role in the family. We provide backing for you. We put you in charge of this. We need to see some money from this. So it's funny that money should have gone to Tommy James, but it went to the Genovese crime family instead. So it's another fascinating story of the chicanery, to use a lame term in this case, you know, that goes on. Parker maybe is not alone in his thievery, and it's kind of a sad story. You hear it a lot. Artists got robbed, and Tommy certainly was one of them. It was a fascinating story, though.
A couple of fascinating things that come out of that story is, it's not like Tommy James and the Shondells were a show band eking out a living and selling a few records. I mean, they were a hit factory, really.
They were, yeah.
So, you know, they were a major, major artist. And one thing that kind of made me chuckle a little bit in the overall scheme of things was perhaps one of the benefits in that Roulette cared so little about the music. It basically gave their artists, you know, complete creative freedom because they didn't care.
Yeah. They didn't care about it at all. I didn't know what you're talking about, Art. Like, just go ahead and I'm not going to appoint anybody to oversee you. I don't care about that. So Tommy does say we were free in the studio to do what we wanted. I mean, we didn't make any money from the results, but we did what we wanted. Nobody was hanging over our career. I even called my old mixtape of his music Psychedelic Bubblegum, because he did both. You know, he was sort of a pop rocker, and then he turned the corner like a lot of people did. But he followed his own muse because, like you say, he was able to. Nobody was hemming him in.
And you've got a couple of great articles on this on your website. You've got a biographical article about Tommy James and the Shondells and their career and their impact on other artists, with all of the the incredible number of songs that they have had covered countless times by other artists who have made them hits all over again.
Yes.
And also the article, which is, I guess, the review that we are discussing now, Tommy James' autobiography, which is Me, the Mob and Music.
That's right, Me, the Mob and the Music, yeah.
I thought it would be interesting to actually bring that in just to apply a little bit of context for Colonel Parker, although I don't necessarily think we can say that Parker wasn't so bad because somebody else was worse.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that works that way, although it's so kind of tempting. Elvis was Colonel Parker's only client. His every waking moment was about furthering Elvis's career. And I don't know that there's too many other artists that have had that level of, leaving aside what we know about the consequences, but I don't know that there are too many artists that have had that level of, I guess, exclusive support from a manager.
This is an enigma. It's funny that the Colonel Parker thing, every time I discuss something about him or read something about him, it adds something to my thoughts and feelings. And I don't feel that I'm there yet with really understanding him and his effect on Elvis. So it's an ongoing process. But yeah, you will often read about an artist wanting to leave a manager because I'm not getting enough attention. I'm not getting enough of his, like, I'm just thinking of Gordon Mills, who managed Tom Jones and Engelbert Humperdinck. I think in both of their books, TJ and Hump said, well, Gordon was dividing his time. I didn't like that. I want somebody who was all mine. So it's interesting, a good point you make. Yes, Parker, I mean, he gambled at the tables, I guess, and he might have ate and slept, but beyond that, it was Elvis nonstop. Now, again, you can be cynical and say that that was his jam. That's something that he loved. I mean, when he ambled up to Hal Wallace and they started to do their thing back and forth, he was in his glory. That's what he was made for. That's how he was wired. Elvis actually allowed him to live the life that maybe he might have dreamed of as a little boy. I want to go up against the biggest guys in the movies and in the music, and I want to run them. I want to control them. I want to act like this bumpkin who turns the tables and gets $3 million out of them. So it was all for Elvis, quote unquote, but heck, I mean, a lot of it was for Parker. But like we said before, yeah, he had Elvis out there nonstop. Now, we could all talk about Elvis was too good to have been treated like a sideshow or to have the silly buttons or to sing to the dog on stage. Or, you know, I always look at the wonderful time period I love so much, the That's the Way It Is time period, 1970 in Las Vegas. But one of the things is those stupid phony straw hats that everybody's wearing, Elvis Summer Festival or whatever. There was always some hokey carnival-like thing with Parker right till the very end. So that's frustrating too, and yet there's a saturation. Maybe management people nowadays, or maybe, 20, 30 years ago would say, well, I fashioned myself after Parker. Look at the way he did. You're not going to duet with anybody. You're not going to make a duet album. You're not going to star too many times with somebody who's just as big as you. No, no, no. We can't have you guesting. He never sang on a Hollywood Palace. He was his own thing, and it was full saturation, full Elvis. The result is the Elvis Presley that we know. He was the hugest. And how did he get that way? His talent, first and foremost, his physical attractiveness, his Elvisness, absolutely, but you can't just go on that. There has to be business going on in the background. And who did that business? Well, Colonel Tom Parker, the wily Dutchman, who credit, I guess you got to give him. He was the architect. I mean, the commerce over art thing is something to lament, definitely. But saturation. Elvis was out there. Coca-Cola, Mickey Mouse, Elvis, don't even need his last name. He's iconic to the nth degree, and he is a product, and he's huge. And that has been proliferated since his death, of course, with the way he's being handled nowadays. But it all started with that crazy Colonel and what he did. So it's debatable. There's a lot to talk about with Colonel, but he was the architect of putting him out there and putting him on Ed Sullivan and putting him in the movies and putting him in places where he did it to death, yes, but, he put him in all these places and he was the biggest star of his time, so there's something to be said for that.
I really do hope you enjoyed this look at, I guess, what became something of a legal and ethical minefield in the wake of Elvis's passing and then the passing of his father, Vernon, a couple of years later in 1979. Huge thanks to Gary for his writing. We've relied on his research for this episode, his article on Blanchard Tual, which was obviously enjoyed by the great man himself and by many thousands of people around the world. And there are a couple of articles on Tommy James and Roulette Records. Now, you can navigate to all of that content easily through this episode's webpage at DEC4podcast.com or go straight to soulrideblog.com, and you can use the search function on that website and that'll take you straight to those articles. Now, we did actually record a little more for this episode, just a bit more of a general chat about Colonel Parker and Elvis, and we'll present that content at a later time in some additional clips and shorts. And we'll leave you just with a couple of moments of Gary and I not performing at our eloquent best. Thank you for listening. There we go. Gary, great to see you. Welcome back.
Good to see you, sir. Thanks for... Okay. The greeting. I screwed up the greeting. That doesn't bode well. Okay.
Gary, welcome back. Great to see you.
Thank you, George. Good to see you. Okay, sorry.
All right. Okay, so this is a good start, isn't it? Okay.
Oh, come on.
All right. Oh. Right.
Oh, boy.
Hang on. We'll just compose ourselves for a minute.
Okay.
Right.
But
oh, sorry, go on.
no, you go ahead.
I would have fucking remember what I was going to say. So, actually, no, I do. You can get in touch with us at deck4podcast.com or leave a comment or question on SoundCloud, YouTube, Spotify, or our social media. Follow Gary Wells at soulrideblog.com, your home for vintage leisure, and Oliver Crocker at devonfirebooks.com and at the Bill Podcast on Patreon or your preferred platform. Check out some great travel videos and tips from Steve Collins on his YouTube channel, Steve Collins Traveller, formerly Please Tell Me Where to Go. Our original instrumental theme and mellow sounds are thanks to Detlef Wolf and hardworking Gainesville, Europe's top Tom Petty tribute band out of Germany. Find them at gainesville-band.com. We take some external guidance on the fair use of potentially copyrighted material for commentary and critique. Details at our website. The Deck 4 podcast is available under Creative Commons. This has been George Fairbrother. Thank you for listening.